We went through the Great Resignation. Now we're going through a situation where a lot of companies are starting to reduce their headcount long term. Where are we going?
There's going to be a big shakeup that's happening. It's already starting.
Okay, so here we are. We're back for another episode of Connected Conversations, Season 2. I am really excited about this guest. I recently met Anya, who is a Senior VP, Occupier Advisory and Transaction Services for CBRE. It's a mouthful. Those consulting firms always have these long titles. But I recently met Anya at a conference and we became fast friends, and she has so much personality. She has so much great insight into the commercial real estate market that I just had to have her on the podcast. And she's been gracious enough to share her time with us today. So I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Anya. Hello, Anya.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me. Who would have thought that a just quick interaction over a couple of beers and some appetizers, or maybe some salads, I don't remember, in New York, would have led to this?
I know. It's super exciting. So, Anya, the reason I wanted to bring you on the podcast today is what we're doing with this season is we're talking about specific topics related to the subject matter expert who's going to be on the meeting with us today. So for you, it's commercial real estate. So why don't we start with you giving us your statement of qualification and a little bit background on how you came to be. I'm not even going to try your title again, but how you
broker. I'm a broker at the end of the day.
How you became a broker. So take us through it, Anya.
Yes. Yeah. My title is super fancy for saying that I'm a broker, and most people can probably read through that, but I appreciate that it's a little robust, I guess. Yeah. So I am a corporate occupier broker. So I focus on multi-market portfolios that are global for large occupiers. So Fortune 500 companies. We do a lot of work with mid-cap companies, but I lead a team of about 40 people. Okay. That's based in Newport Beach and Atlanta. And we run about 20 plus accounts for companies along various industries. So really my focus is more around the office and industrial space. I do a little bit of retail here and there, but that's my focus. And that's predominantly what my team does as well. We have some retail focused accounts, but a lot of it's office and industrial.
Okay. And then a little bit about your background. How did you end up as a broker?
It's very funny because from a young age, I wanted to be in real estate. Huh. I didn't know what commercial real estate was when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, but I was lucky enough to compete in Miss Teen California, which was in the Miss America.
Hang on. Did you win?
No, I did not win. Far from it.
In my book, you're the winner.
I appreciate that. So I was lucky enough to compete in Fresno, California, and all the other gals, everyone was getting ready for college. We were 16 years old, roughly. And everyone, when they'd go on stage and would talk about what they want to be when they grew up, technically, everyone would say, I want to be a doctor. I want to cure cancer. I want to be a lawyer. And I took the stage and said, I want to be a real estate agent. And I didn't even know what I was saying. I just knew everyone had always told me I had a personality for real estate. So I thought, okay, I'll sell houses. And then as I got older, I realized that I didn't want to participate in the emotional side of residential real estate. And so I was sort of shifted into the commercial real estate side of things. And I actually got my start from one of my sorority sisters. Her father offered me an internship when I was at Cal State Fullerton and I was 19 years old. So that got me into the industry, started there at a company that basically did property management, brokerage, development. So I was exposed to a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. Then went on to intern in industrial development and graduated college. I was lucky enough to graduate college in 2009, which was feeling oddly familiar about what's going on, today and June of 2022. So I was told by some mentors that you should get into brokerage. You have the personality for it. I thought I wanted to be in development, and they just said, I really feel like you should go the broker route. You got the personality for it. Nobody's making money right now. go in and learn. And it took about 29 interviews, but I finally got to start on a brokerage team at CBRE.
So it's funny because we talked about this before. That whole 2009, right?
Yeah.
What you're referring to is the housing crisis, the crash of 2009.
Yep.
And at that time, and this is a weird intersection in our professional histories, I was doing a project in Orange County for one of the biggest retail property owners, managers in the area. And it was a very difficult project. It was a difficult situation. And then the crash happened and that project went away. It worked out to our advantage. It was a profitable project, but we never delivered because the circuit cities of the world were closing and all these anchor stores. See, I know a little bit of the jargon.
You know enough to be dangerous.
I know a little bit to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Were closing and they technology was one of the areas they cut. And then I went on to do a project for Northrop Grumman, which is also in that Southern California, Orange County area. So at the same time, like sliding doors, we had pivotal moments because those projects, the first one didn't quite go for me, but it was good. But the next one did go for me, and it kind of launched me on the path of my illustrious career, which ends me here talking to you today. Which I thought the idea of us passing each other on the 405 or somewhere
pissed off driving on the 405,
not knowing where our careers are going or if we're going to make it through this recession or whatever was going on at the time.
Yes.
So basically. You never know.
Yep. And things are feeling oddly familiar right now with just some of the rumblings of what's going on. It's definitely concerning me, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place. So let's start here. So with every podcast in this season, our theme for this season is Back to the Future. I'm a big Marty McFly fan. So Back to the Future, what I want to do in season 2 is talk about what the future looks like. And now, so more than ever, there's a lot of uncertainty. We went through a period of uncertainty to just step right into another period of uncertainty. And when me and Fred were preparing this episode, Fred said, when is it going to be safe, Bob? We got to figure that out throughout the podcast. Now, I'm not asking you to break out your crystal ball and tell us the future, but if you could kind of speak a little bit about where you see things going in the near term and maybe in the long term in commercial real estate. And Fred pulled an article before this from Forbes that said office is going to continue to struggle. Industrial continues to thrive. Multifamily continues to thrive. You told me that. Yep. Hospitality is starting to rebound as people start to go on vacation. And then you also mentioned multifamily. So if you could talk about kind of where you see things going in the near term and a little bit of long term. I know I threw a bunch of different sectors at you, but I know you work in a couple of those. So if you want to speak on the ones that make the most sense, that's
sure. I can share with the ones that I sort of live in every day. So on the office side, it's, no one's coming back to the office. And maybe that's a little too much of a blanket statement, but it's pretty dismal. And I think, we've seen a lot of large statements being made by people like Elon Musk, but at the end of the day, up to now, and I'm not saying this is going to continue, but up to now, the control was sort of with the employee. So if they didn't want to come back, they didn't come back. And what I'm seeing for the future is I'm really seeing people continuing to need a reason to come to the office.
Sure.
Not just, and a demand from your employer is likely not going to do it. I think there's got to be intention around the office. And what I don't see these large headquarters. We see so many of these campuses, and I know you've probably worked on them, Bob, in the past. And I think what we're going to see more is these micro HQs based in various parts of the U.S. I think a lot of companies,
they're called the big
hub and spoke. Is that it's so funny. I was talking to somebody the other day and we're like, what is hub and spoke? Like it's a buzzword. All it means is they're going to be out in these there's going to be satellite offices in these smaller markets where there's a large congregation of employees. And really the office isn't going to be you walk in and you've got your conference room and a sea of cubes and a few private offices for those that have earned them by whatever title they've achieved. It's going to be, hey, I've got some awesome technology, which I think is a huge opportunity for you, Bob. Yeah. Awesome technology, very cool meeting space, spending a bunch of time in common areas where you can have, large meetings, smaller meetings, collaboration. But I don't think gone are the days of I go to the office and my desk right there says Anya and I'm the only one that sits there. That's not going to happen anymore. The other term I've been hearing a lot is instead of central business districts, CBDs, they're calling them BBDs, better business districts. Mm-hmm. So I think some of these satellites are going to flock to areas that are close to a lot of family where families live, multifamily. Orange County, where I live, Orange County, California, what we're seeing is Irvine was always the CBD, the central business district. Well, now South Orange County is where all the younger families are moving. It's more affordable. The schools are good. So now we're seeing South Orange County coming back to the office, but Irvine, not so much. And then on the industrial side of things, I feel like industrial is going to continue to stay strong, but I do feel that there are some markets like Phoenix. I think Phoenix is going to be a big winner because there's a lot of construction going on, a lot of jobs being created out there, and a lot of companies that just don't feel like California, unfortunately, my home state, is business friendly anymore.
Anya, can I ask you a question? Is Arizona one of those places where somebody might relocate their headquarters to or build a spoke that's more desirable because they can pull from that, the top talent coming from those universities and draw on some of those resources that Arizona might have that California doesn't have?
While Arizona is getting a lot of headquarter activity per se, I see it as more of a hub and spoke environment where companies will go there because they know that the labor force is there, but it's not necessarily going to be a major HQ environment.
What about industrial?
Industrial, same thing.
Is industrial just kind of spread wherever they can find a warehouse or a space to put a warehouse? Is that, or is there a specific market that's hot for industrial?
Outside of Phoenix. Obviously, the population. Also, Phoenix actually isn't that far away from a lot of different port areas. So like LA, it's kind of in the middle of LA, Long Beach, Houston. So depending on, and gas prices are a whole other situation, but I'm seeing a lot of development out in Phoenix. Tucson, not as much. Tucson, I think you've probably known it as well as kind of a college town. Yep. But definitely out in Phoenix. And I'm also seeing companies replacing jobs that were once California-based jobs in areas like Phoenix.
Now so you also mentioned a market like Dallas. What's your take? Yeah. You had a good take on Dallas.
There's a ton of construction, and trust me, I love Dallas. I'd like to move to Dallas at some point in my life. But I think there could be a situation of some overbuilding going on there because there's just so much land and everything's been moving in such a direction that everyone wants to be in Texas. But part of me wonders, there's a lot of spec development going on. And does that mean that we're going to end up with a lot of more vacancy in that market? Yeah. In places like the Inland Empire, from an industrial perspective, we only have so much land out here. So if it's spoken for, it's spoken for. But out in the Dallas area, you can go as far as the eye can see. And I think a lot of people have gotten really excited about that. But it's going to be interesting depending on what happens with the economy and all this, what happens with vacancy rates out there. And if the absorption actually follows all of this spec development. So
what's another market? I find all this stuff fascinating because to me, this is the very smart aspect of real estate, corporate real estate, industrial, however you want to look at it. I find it really interesting. Okay, this is the market selection, if you will. This is the market where we can draw, from these universities that have developers, or we can draw on unskilled blue collar workers to work in our warehousing. What's another location? I know Raleigh was a big hot area for a while there. What's another geography that's like super hot right now?
Well, it depends on the industry sector, but I would say on the industrial side, actually Boise is another hot market. Actually, CBRE just released today, emerging industrial market, Boise, Idaho. Do you know that population in Boise, Idaho, 22% of people there are between the ages of 18 and 34?
Is that because of a military presence, a university presence?
A little bit of both. Yeah, a little bit of all of that. You got it.
So it comes down to, again, that's that market analysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Market selection, where are we going to strategically go with our portfolio? And it sounds like they're heading out to Idaho.
Yeah, there are a lot of tech companies that are heading out that way as well. Salt Lake,
really?
and then
I
Idaho.
knew about Salt Lake. Idaho was never on my radar. I'm going to have to read that report.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to you. So it's quite interesting. And really but I think for the financial services sector, so if we kind of toggle back to office, I think Phoenix, Charlotte, those are big hubs for financial services, and even Atlanta too. One other point I'll make is just that over the course of the last 2 years, a lot of companies are finding we're helping our clients determine where have your employees moved through the pandemic.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, that's another piece of it is did you know that you've got a large concentration of people in Bozeman, Montana right now that were once living in Los Angeles? That's something to contemplate as well. And you got to hope these employees are informing HR about their move. You'd hope. But we're doing a lot of analysis around where were the migration patterns and how were those migration patterns determining where we decide to retain.
Does your team specifically do that?
We do. We pull in CBRE resources to do it, but we drive that process. Yes.
I love that. These are the things I absolutely love about commercial real estate, the more strategic aspect. I never even thought about that. Is there, off the top of your head, I don't mean to put you on the spot, is there any place that people have seemed to move to that you know of more so than other? I know you mentioned Bozeman, Montana. Is there any other place?
That was actually just kind of anecdotally for one of my clients, but Nashville and a lot of Austin, Texas relos.
I know, it's funny because Austin, Texas, we were talking about this. Elon Musk moved Tesla down there.
Yep. And
Apple, some time ago when I was traveling down there, started to build down there, and that became a major hub or spoke for Apple. Dell's been down there for years. So all of a sudden, Austin, this city in the middle of Texas, all of a sudden becomes this hotbed for technology. And it's like, could you imagine telling somebody from Texas that 30 years ago that the city?
They would have said you were nuts.
You're nuts.
There's just no chance. Nobody even knew where Austin was. I mean, It's the capital, but no one really knew where the heck it was just a few years ago. And I will say this, the reports that I read, Austin has one of the highest return to office rates.
Really?
Yes. And it's a lot of younger population, people, living 3-4 people in an apartment. They need to go to an office, or they want to be with their teams because that's their phase of life. But they have one of the highest return to office rates.
But on the downside, and I agree with you because I've been traveling to Austin for years and years, having done some work with Dell in my past, I would come back and tell people where I was, and they're like, "Oh, Austin, I've never been there. I've heard good things." But I travel there today, and my has the city changed. It's there's a hotel on a corner that used to be a parking lot, and this is like from one summer to the next, and it's like I don't think they're prepared. The infrastructure there is robust enough to accommodate this growth, especially when you look at the traffic starting at 3:00 in the afternoon.
You got a 405 situation in Austin.
Yeah. So how do let me ask you this now? When you're doing these market analysis and you're helping your customers, do you factor that into it where it's like, oh, we really like Austin for X, Y, or Z, and then you have to say, yeah, but. How do you come about that? How do you arrive at that? What I say again is just from me. It's anecdotal. Like me traveling there, I know there's a lot of traffic because the highway wasn't built to manage. sustain all this population. Mm-hmm. So how do you arrive at that? How do you say, well, maybe this isn't a good fit for this? How do you arrive at that?
There's got to be some driving factors as to, there's got to be key factors into what we're trying to get out of a certain location. So it could be, access to talent. It could be cost of living. It could be all these things. But then once we know that, we can drill down and basically tell you, because, ESG is super important for companies right now and all that. We can tell you exactly what the average commute time is going to be for each of your employees based on different zip code analysis, and also tell you what your carbon footprint is by allowing those employees to drive to the office every day. So all of that kind of plays a factor. It's just how the company ranks each of these data points.
That's so interesting. And when you bring up ESG, how many off the top of your head because that's state by state mandates, right?
Yes. It's more company. Like in my experience, it's more what the company.
Well, California has mandates, don't they?
California has some pretty gnarly ones. Yes.
All right. But it's also, to your point, it's how the company values that, what the impact on the environment is. And to be quite frank, and we're always blatantly honest on this podcast, to me, it's a PR situation. I've worked for companies in the past that had, as a consultant, they had horrible PR for whatever reason.
Yep.
So they invested a little bit more in their environmental and sustainability programs.
Yep.
That showed up in the news a little more. But so that's interesting. It's less about the state regulations and it's more about how the company, are we moving towards a place where the states and potentially the federal government, not that, we want to get too much into that right now, but are we moving in a direction where they're going to start mandating these things from an environmental perspective, or are we still a little ways out from that?
I think in California, we're like already there. I think it's really state by state. AB 2840 is this bill that's basically, I missed it today. I was going to dial in. There was a hearing about it today. And basically this really affects San Bernardino and Riverside County. So it's here in Southern California in the Inland Empire, but they're trying to mandate that you cannot build an industrial development over 100,000 feet, build or expand over 100,000 feet within 1,000 feet of a sensitive receptor area. So that would be like something that's not zoned for industrial.
Yep.
So if you've got housing in a lot of parts of Inland Empire, you've got housing and there's an Amazon distribution facility like right across the street. They're trying to say that they don't want this anymore because they want to be able to, help the environment and basically, they want to bring only certain skilled labor that's local. So they want to kind of control how the jobs are being distributed. And really, a lot of those of us in the real estate side are pushing against that because what's happening is now those companies that we're representing who need space in the Inland Empire, which is already less than 1% vacant, are being forced to say, do we even want to stay in Southern California?
And they go to Texas.
Or they go to Phoenix, or they go to Las Vegas. Yeah.
So that, I think you just made your own point right there.
Yep.
Basically about talking about these markets like Phoenix and markets in Texas and now Boise, Idaho, because at the end of the day, the regulations may force companies to look elsewhere, and who better to help them. And that's really like, when people, I think, this is a really interesting conversation because this is less about terms and conditions of a lease. And it's more about how do you make a strategic decision on where you grow your footprint and your workforce. And I think that's probably what we're going to walk away from as a big takeaway from this podcast. It's not just about negotiating a lease and finding the best cost per square foot. There's a lot more that goes into your job that people probably don't realize.
Oh, I spend more time than one would think on tax incentives and understanding exactly, like all of these factors, ESG, labor analytics, huge. And it's gone are the days of I run a survey, I show a couple buildings, and this is, and then a decision is made and we go to leases. It's just that's not the type of work I do. I'm sure there are opportunities to do that type of work, but I almost call myself more of a strategic consultant and an advisor than even, a transactional broker.
I think anybody who watches this, and I hope a lot of people do, because that's what I got from this. I mean, it's much more. We haven't even touched on that piece of the end of the line, negotiating the final contract for the space. So with all that said, now, in the interest of our, we kind of talked about the topics that I think we really wanted to cover.
Yep.
But the theme of this podcast, again, is back to the future. So, and I want to go back to what Fred asked me before you jumped on here. With so much uncertainty, we just went through a pandemic. We just went through the whole return to office, working from home kind of situation that's still ongoing. And now we went through the Great Resignation. Now we're going through a situation where a lot of companies are starting to reduce their headcount. So where do you see things going? You don't need to focus on any one sector, but just broadly, again, I think you gave us a good swatch of the near term, long term. Where are we going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like long-term, people are really, there's going to be a big shakeup that's happening. Yeah, it's already starting. Yeah. A lot of tech companies have come out this week even saying we're going to, these hiring freezes and all this kind of stuff. But I think long-term, companies are going to AI. They say there's 5 generations in the workforce. It's like Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, and AI. I think artificial intelligence is going to be replacing a lot of jobs.
Okay.
Now there's all of this talk about, the metaverse and all that kind of stuff. I'm not super well versed on it, and I'm not sure that I've bought into it quite yet, but I will say, like, the biggest thing I see for the future is AI, and how are we going to be able to mesh all of these people and skill sets along with the AI that's coming into the workplace.
Well, I'll tell you this. The only thing I know about the metaverse is somebody paid like $100,000 to be Snoop Dogg's neighbor in the Facebook metaverse or something.
Is that serious?
There was like a bidding war to be Snoop Dogg's neighbor. So that's what everybody's going to take away from my takeaway from this. They're going to get a lot of smart stuff from Anya, and then they're going to say, well, Bob talked about Snoop Dogg.
No, it's so funny because I heard some brokerage firm like leased space in the metaverse, and honestly, maybe CBRE did. I'm not sure, but it's
that conference we met at. I sat through a whole session on the metaverse.
I'm just not there. Call me old school.
I'm not there either, because we both started in Orange County dealing with property managers, property owners, and these big retail centers and all this other stuff. So I do, I look at it this way, and I talk to Fred about this a lot, because Fred's, the next generation before me. I'm a Gen Xer. And what I remind him with, we just went through the Great Resignation, right? Where folks had choice, because there were companies now looking to fill positions and people could choose to leave what they had for the grasses being greener on the other side.
Yeah.
But then you enter into a situation like we're in right now, where companies hiring freezes and there's staff reductions actively happening.
Yep.
Across the board, not just the tech sector. We're seeing it in other areas. Gas prices are at an all-time high, I guess. They could be. What I'm saying is, I don't have the stats in front of me. Gas prices are very high.
Yep.
And inflation is at an all-time high. So I talk to Fred and I say, you're not always going to have choice. And it's not always, because when me and you were crossing paths in Orange County, my job was not guaranteed. Yeah. And then I saw where things were going, and I was like, wow, I'm going to probably have a real lean. I was very successful in the tech projects, fortunately, that I had going. that if I lost my job, it was going to be probably pretty lean for a little while as I looked for another one, because I'm not going to have a lot of choice.
Yeah.
And that's what I see.
Well, and the other thing I see is like, I still, recession or not, I think your generation, and I'm right behind you because I'm a millennial. I see more entrepreneurs coming out of this, even in a recession, because I'm finding, people are losing their ability to choose, but they still want control. And I see that with my friend group. I see that just, peer group in business.
Yes.
People want to control their own destiny, recession or not. And so I have a feeling that, and I like to think I have an ability to be entrepreneurial, even though I work for a large company, because of what it is that I do. But I do think that there's going to be more of this coming out, in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And I think even these kids that are coming out of high school right now in college, I think they want to work for themselves, and they're going to do what they need to do in order to make that happen.
I couldn't agree with you more. And being a Gen Xer, that's why we started the podcast. It's kind of like this is one little thing of many things that I do. So it's kind of like entrepreneurial marketing for my company, though.
Yep.
That I do have that spirit. And someday I would like to say I don't have a boss. Like I do agree with that. But when you were talking, I was like, well, why didn't I go down a path of entrepreneurship? Because I lived through the tech bubble.
Yeah, I was saying, were you feeling FOMO from what I was describing?
No, and now I remember why, because the tech bubble was just such a nightmare. It was the early part of my career.
Yep.
The tech bubble.
Yep.
I made it through the tech bubble.
Yes.
And I made it through the housing crisis. I made it. And when am I going to run out of my 9 lives? I don't know.
It's so true. It's so true. And I don't know if you see this in your side of the industry, but like on the brokerage side, there were a lot of guys and gals who got out of brokerage when the tech bubble happened because they saw an ability to make fast cash. There's really big age gaps in our business. There's a lot of people in their 50s right now. There are way less people in their early to mid 40s. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of my mid 30s group. And part of me wonders is like coming out of COVID, I think on the real estate brokerage side, any kid that's coming out of college over the last couple of years and saying, I want to be, an office leasing broker, I think their parents were saying, yeah, try again.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place, because I love working with the younger generation. Yep. Because number one, they're really, I'll go so far as to say they're smarter than me, than I was at that age. They're smarter because they have more. Fred was just asking me how I learned things when I was younger. And I was like, Fred, I taught myself how to fly fish from a book. I was learning knots because I didn't have, Fred has YouTube,
You didn't have that.
I didn't have that. So and I love working with the younger generation because I love to mentor and coach them on things that maybe were lacking in earlier roles they had, kind of how to interact with people on a personal level, not so much over a cell phone or a keyboard, how to be a leader, how to mentor, how to take somebody under their wing, and how to approach a business situation the correct way that maybe you wouldn't approach it the way you approach a social. I feel they need help with those things. Yes. But then when it comes to a podcast, I go to Fred I'm like, Fred, should we do this? Is this a good guest? He has all the answers when it comes to that. So that was a really long-winded take there. But what I was getting at is, Anya, the younger generation, as we move into the future, what advice would you give? Is Anya's career path a good one to follow?
So funny.
Be honest.
Okay. Well, just have a quick story. A guy I worked for when I first got in the business said to me, I would never tell my daughter to become a broker.
Okay. Why is that?
and it's such a rough business, and it's just, and people are brutal, and there are so many other things you could do. And it was funny because he was a broker and he's a very successful broker. So I found that to be very interesting, because I figured he'd made more money than he ever could have doing anything else. But, so you're back to your question of like, is my path the right path to go down? I think there is still an insane opportunity, particularly for women, to get into this business.
Love it.
I feel like I am seeing more and more women come in, and it's making me really excited. And we're bringing a lot of women on our team. And look, nothing against the guys. We're all about the guys too, but it's really nice to see some variation in genders, because even just 10, 12 years ago when I got in the business, I was just around guys. Like that was it. But I think, in terms of advice, I really feel like people need to figure out what their skill set is, particularly if you want to go into a sales role. Personality wise, it's huge if you want to get into this side of the business. But I still think there's an opportunity for someone who can write code, because corporate real estate technology is just blowing up right now. I mean, I just was at the CBRE Tech Conference. I think you might have been there too, a few months back, and I was blown away. So one thing I could say is I don't think anyone that's young should ever be dissuaded to pursue a path in commercial real estate. It doesn't have to be a sales path. There is something for everyone.
Anya, I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you took the time to share your knowledge, your experience, your history. I gained a lot from this. And what the real takeaway I took from this is just, number one, the wealth of knowledge you have. And number two, what it really takes to be a broker for a CBRE. It's not just, again, I said this earlier, it's not just T's and C's of a contract. It's more strategic than that. And all the things you talked about, market selection, talent, ESG and carbon footprint, it all has to go into the equation. And quite frankly, Anya, whatever you're selling, I'm buying. I would happily buy whatever you're selling. And again, I'm going to reiterate this in my mind, whatever year that was, you won Miss Teen California, and you will always be that to me. But I want to thank you so much. In the short time that I've known you, you've become a great friend to me. And I really admire you for being a woman in the corporate real estate space. And the only thing that I ask you is you keep inspiring the younger generation, and you become a leader and grow in this field so that young girls can look up to you and say, someday I want to be like Anya. So I'm going to leave you with that. And once again, express my gratitude and say thank you very much for your time today, Anya.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.